April 26, 1945, 14:38 hours, the ground outside Berlin trembles as Soviet artillery crashes in from the east. Dust shakes loose from shattered hangars. The air smells of cordite, burning fuel, and wet earth. Somewhere near the runway, a tank engine coughs, then roars to life. Steel tracks bite into mud. For the men inside, time has narrowed to seconds. Ahead of them lies Berlin's last working airfield. Behind them, a city already dying. And in front of them, Soviet tanks are coming fast out. A shell detonates close enough to slap the hull with invisible hands. The shock rattles teeth. A commander grips his periscope, breath shallow, eyes scanning through smoke. Orders crackle over a failing radio. There is no plan written for this moment. Only instinct, training, and the knowledge that if the enemy breaks through now, Berlin is sealed for good. For a brief stretch of time, later remembered as no more than 18 minutes, everything will hang in the balance. Berlin in late April 1945 is a city collapsing inward. The Red Army has encircled the capital, crushing German defenses sector by sector. From the east, Marshal Zhukov's First Belarusian Front pushes relentlessly across the Selo Heights and into the suburbs. From the south, Konyev's forces close the noose. Streets are choked with rubble. Civilians hide in cellars. Units exist more on paper than in reality, yet one lifeline still remains. On Berlin's western edge, airfields like Gatto and Staaken are still operational. Barely, but enough. Transport aircraft land under fire, evacuating wounded soldiers, key personnel, and supplies. Each landing strips away another fragment of time. Each takeoff is a refusal to accept the inevitable just yet. Adolf Hitler, sealed in his bunker, understands what these airfields mean. So do the Soviets. Whoever controls them controls Berlin's last breath. The task of defending this sector falls to fragments of Germany's remaining armored forces, including elements of Panzer-Division Müncheberg. Formed hastily in March 1945, Müncheberg is a division in name more than strength, assembled from training units, remnants of shattered formations, and whatever tanks can still move. Some crews are veterans of the Eastern Front. Others are barely trained replacements. Fuel is scarce. Ammunition is rationed. Radios fail as often as they work, but the tanks themselves, Panthers among them, are still dangerous. The Panther is a predator at range, its long 75mm gun capable of killing Soviet T-34s before they can reply. In open terrain, with space to maneuver, it remains a formidable weapon. Berlin offers none of those advantages. Streets are narrow. Visibility is poor. Ambush is constant. Tanks fight at distances measured in dozens of meters, not hundreds. Meanwhile, Soviet armored spearheads are driving west with speed and confidence. Their doctrine emphasizes momentum. Break through, keep moving, do not give the enemy time to recover. For the crews of T-34 divided by 85s pushing toward Berlin's airfields, resistance is expected, but brief. German armor, they believe, is finished. They are wrong. Along the approaches to Gatto and Staaken, German commanders scrape together what they can. A handful of tanks. Assault guns. Panzerfaust teams hidden in ruins. Orders are blunt and simple: delay the enemy. Do not seek decisive victory. Do not get drawn into prolonged combat. Hold them, just long enough. Why 18 minutes? Because that is the time calculated for aircraft already inbound to land, load, and take off again. Because wounded men are already on stretchers near the runway. Because command staff are still evacuating. Because every additional minute keeps the corridor open. Meanwhile, inside the German tanks, the psychological weight is immense. Crews know the war is lost. They have seen it in the faces of refugees, in the skies filled with Allied aircraft, in the silence from headquarters. But this mission is different. This is not about winning the war. It is about buying time. About choosing where the end will fall. The terrain favors neither side. Open ground near the airfields gives way to hedgerows, buildings, and shallow depressions. Smoke from burning vehicles drifts unpredictably, sometimes hiding movement, sometimes revealing it at the worst possible moment. Gunners wipe sweat from their eyes. Loaders brace themselves against recoil. Commanders shout corrections over engine noise. Somewhere ahead, Soviet tank engines grow louder. Maps are outdated. Positions change by the minute. A German officer, peering through binoculars, spots dust clouds on the horizon. Tanks. More than expected. He radios back a warning, unsure if it will be received. Inside one Panther, the crew waits, engine idling, hull angled slightly to maximize armor. The gun is trained on a road cutting through rubble. The gunner counts seconds without realizing it. The commander listens to the rhythm of distant artillery, trying to judge how close the Soviets really are. They all know the same thing: once contact is made, there will be no retreat. The airfield is directly behind them. If they fall back too far, Soviet shells will start landing on the runway itself, and then, suddenly, it begins. A Soviet T-34 emerges from smoke, its turret already turning. A shout. A command. The Panther fires. The recoil slams through the tank. The shell streaks across the gap. This first shot will decide nothing on its own. But it announces the duel. It tells both sides that this will not be a simple advance. That for the next few minutes, however long they last, steel will answer steel. As more Soviet tanks roll forward, and German crews commit fully to the defense, the question becomes brutally clear: can a handful of exhausted machines really hold back an entire armored thrust long enough to save Berlin's last airfield, or will these 18 minutes vanish faster than anyone expects? The fighting intensifies almost immediately, spreading outward from that first exchange like ripples in dirty water. Soviet tanks advance in pairs and threes, engines roaring, infantry clinging to hulls or moving cautiously through the ruins behind them. Their objective is clear: punch through the thin German screen and reach the airfield perimeter before more aircraft can land or escape. German crews react with drilled efficiency born of years on the Eastern Front. Panthers shift positions after every shot, reversing behind rubble, ducking into shell holes, using buildings as partial cover. Staying still is death. Soviet artillery begins to range in, shells walking closer with each thunderous impact. Shrapnel rattles against armor like gravel thrown by an angry giant. Inside the tanks, the sensory overload is constant. The smell of burnt propellant hangs in the air. Spent shell casings clatter to the floor. The engine heat mixes with sweat and fear, turning the interior into a suffocating metal box. Commands are shouted over the intercom, sometimes drowned out entirely by the violence outside. The Soviet crews are no less pressured. They have orders to keep moving, to exploit momentum, to avoid getting bogged down in local fights. But Berlin is not open steppe. Every street corner is a potential ambush. Every wreck blocks the path. German Panzerfaust teams lurk in basements and behind walls, waiting for a tank to pass too close. AT-34 rounds a bend too aggressively. A flash. A hollow thump. The tank jolts, smoke pouring from its engine deck. The crew bails out, scrambling for cover as machine gun fire cuts the air above their heads. Nearby, another Soviet tank fires blindly into a building suspected of hiding German infantry, the structure collapsing in a cloud of dust and brick. Time becomes elastic. For the men fighting, there is no sense of 18 minutes ticking away. There is only the next target. The next command. The next threat. Meanwhile, behind the German armored screen, activity at the airfield is frantic. Aircraft engines scream as transport planes line up on the battered runway. Ground crews work with mechanical focus, loading wounded men, staff officers, and supplies under the threat of incoming fire. Each takeoff is a gamble. Soviet artillery could begin shelling the airfield at any moment. The German command understands this. Radios crackle with clipped instructions: hold positions at all costs, but do not pursue. Destroy tanks if possible. Delay above all else. Every minute gained here translates directly into lives saved behind them. On the Soviet side, commanders begin to realize the resistance is stiffer than anticipated. Reports filter back of Panthers operating effectively, of unexpected losses, of progress slowing. This is dangerous. Delays give the enemy time to reorganize. Even in a collapsing city, orders are issued to push harder. More tanks surge forward. The sound is overwhelming now, a layered roar of engines, explosions, collapsing masonry. Smoke thickens, reducing visibility to mere meters in places. Crews fire at shapes, at movement, at anything that looks wrong. In one exchange, a Panther engages two T-34 divided by 85s almost simultaneously. The first shot punches through a turret ring. The second Soviet tank fires back instantly, the shell glancing off the Panther's angled frontal armor. The German loader is already ramming another round home. The tank lurches as it fires again, but attrition cuts both ways. German ammunition stocks are finite. Some tanks are already down to their last few armor-piercing rounds. Fuel gauges hover dangerously low. One Panther takes a hit to its running gear, tracks snapping with a metallic scream. The crew knows the tank is finished as a maneuvering vehicle. They keep firing anyway, turning it into a stationary gun platform. Elsewhere, Soviet infantry finally closes the distance, creeping through rubble and drainage ditches. Panzerfaust teams clash with them at terrifyingly close range. The fighting becomes intimate, brutal. Shouts. Screams. Short bursts of gunfire echoing between shattered walls. The airfield clock keeps moving. Aircraft continue to come and go. Some land with bullet holes already punched through their fuselages. Others take off under near-miss artillery fire, wheels lifting just as explosions tear up the runway behind them. Each successful departure feels like cheating fate. German tank commanders glance backward whenever they can, catching brief glimpses of aircraft silhouettes lifting into smoke-filled skies. It reinforces why they are here. Why they cannot fall back yet. On the Soviet side, frustration builds. Losses mount faster than expected. Progress is measured in meters. Commanders urge their crews forward, reminding them that the prize is within reach. Once the airfield falls, Berlin's west is sealed. No more evacuations. No more hope of escape. A Soviet tank finally breaks through a weak point, pushing dangerously close to the perimeter. For a moment, it looks like the defense has failed. German infantry scatter. The tank's gun swings toward the runway, then a Panther, previously hidden behind a low rise, emerges just long enough to fire. The shot is clean. The Soviet tank erupts in flame, blocking the approach road with its burning hull. That single wreck buys more time, but time is slipping away. German commanders know their position is becoming untenable. Soviet numbers are too great. Ammunition is nearly gone. Casualties are rising. The 18 minutes they were meant to hold are nearly spent, but no one on the ground knows exactly how much has passed. Somewhere in the chaos, a radio transmission finally confirms it. Most of the aircraft have departed. The wounded are gone. Key personnel evacuated. The airfield has done its job. Now the question changes. Do the defenders attempt to disengage while they still can, or do they fight on a little longer, risking annihilation? To make absolutely certain the Soviets cannot immediately occupy the field, as smoke thickens and fresh Soviet armor pushes forward once more, German tank commanders face a final decision, one that will determine whether this desperate stand ends in survival or silence. The decision comes not with a dramatic order, but with a quiet shift in tone over the radio. German commanders understand what has been achieved. The airfield has served its final purpose. The window, measured not in victory, but in minutes, has closed. The tanks that can still move begin to pull back, one by one, using smoke, ruins, and burning wrecks as cover. There is no clean withdrawal. Some crews reverse blindly, engines screaming as shells burst around them. Others abandon damaged vehicles and disappear into the rubble on foot. A few stay behind just long enough to fire their last rounds, ensuring the Soviets cannot surge forward immediately. For the Red Army, the resistance finally begins to crack. German fire slackens. Panthers that had dominated key approaches fall silent or retreat. Soviet tanks push cautiously at first, wary of traps, then with growing confidence. The ground near the airfield is littered with twisted metal, shattered tracks, and burning hulks from both sides. When Soviet forward units finally reach the perimeter, the runway lies scarred but empty. No aircraft are warming engines. No figures are running for cover. The sky above is quiet, save for distant artillery smoke drifting in the spring air. Berlin's last airfield has slipped from German hands, but not before it gave up everything it could. The duel is over. In the larger scope of the Battle of Berlin, this fight barely registers as a footnote. No sweeping arrows on a map. No named operation. No grand victory claimed by either side. Yet its impact is real and immediate. Hundreds of wounded soldiers are evacuated who would otherwise have been captured or killed. Key personnel escape westward. Supplies are moved. Time, precious, irreplaceable time, is stolen from an enemy racing to end the war. For the men who fought there, the memory is far sharper than any strategic summary. German tank crews emerge from their machines shaking, deafened, coated in grime and smoke. Some will continue fighting in the city. Others will surrender within days. A few will not survive the night. They know the war is ending, but survival now depends on navigating chaos rather than orders. Soviet crews, too, absorb the cost. Burned out T-34s mark the approaches. Infantry units regroup, stepping over wreckage that moments earlier had been alive with noise and movement. The push continues, relentless, toward the Reichstag, toward the heart of Berlin. There is no pause for reflection. From a tactical standpoint, the engagement reinforces a truth learned repeatedly in World War II's final months: even a collapsing force, if properly positioned and motivated, can impose delay and cost on a superior attacker. Armor used not for breakthrough, but for denial. Firepower employed not to win ground, but to hold time. Panzer-Division Müncheberg, like so many late-war German formations, exists in fragments by this point. It will be bled white in the streets of Berlin over the following days. Its name will be overshadowed by larger, more famous battles. But here, near the city's western edge, its remnants perform exactly the role demanded of them. On the Soviet side, the capture of the airfields confirms what everyone already knows: Berlin is sealed. No meaningful evacuation remains. The city's fate is now a matter of days, not weeks. The final assaults are planned with grim efficiency. History moves forward. In the years after the war, these brief, violent encounters are reconstructed from scattered reports, memoirs, and after-action notes. Tank commanders recall distances measured in heartbeats. Gunners remember shapes emerging through smoke. Infantrymen describe the sound of engines growing louder, then suddenly stopping forever. No one remembers checking a watch. The 18 minutes becomes a way of understanding the moment in hindsight, a human attempt to put structure around chaos. It is not exact. It does not need to be. What matters is the concept, a sliver of time carved out of collapse, held at gunpoint by exhausted men and machines. Berlin falls soon after. Hitler dies in his bunker. Germany surrenders. The war in Europe ends. The airfields that once kept the city breathing fade into the background of history. Runways are rebuilt. New aircraft land under new flags. The ground where tanks once dueled becomes quiet again, yet the lesson endures. World War II is often told through massive offensives and decisive battles, but its outcome is shaped just as much by moments like this: small, desperate stands where the objective is not to win, but to delay. To protect. To buy time for others. Innovation did not always mean new technology. Sometimes it meant using what remained in an unexpected way. Tanks as shields rather than spears. Armor as a stopwatch. For modern audiences, accustomed to satellite imagery and real-time coordination, it is easy to forget how uncertain everything once was. Decisions were made through smoke, noise, and incomplete information. Courage was not abstract. It was physical. Tangible. Heavy as steel. If you look closely at the end of the war, you will find many such moments hiding between the headlines. Places where time, not territory, was the most valuable currency. Where survival depended on holding just a little longer than seemed possible, and that raises a quiet question worth considering: how many other turning points of history lasted only minutes, then vanished into the rubble, waiting for someone to notice what they truly meant?